We're going to listen to the international best-selling author, Ed Gruver, concerning this very important book that I am very fortunate to have a copy of and was going through the last few days, From Baltimore to Broadway, Joe, the Jets, and the Super Bowl III Guarantee. How you doing, Ed?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing real good, sir. How important, well, I'll tell you what, give me the climate of the NFL during this period of time, and why was the statement made by Joe Namath such a big issue?
The climate at the time of Super Bowl III was that the AFL was an inferior league to the NFL, given that Vince Lombardi's Packers had dominated Kansas City and Oakland in the first two Super Bowls. And the Colts were expected to dominate the Jets even more so in Super Bowl III, because a lot of people thought the Colts were a better team than Vince Lombardi's Packers had been in the first two Super Bowls. So when Joe Namath, openly guaranteed a victory over Baltimore, that was a pretty big bombshell.
Do you think that many times right now, prior to the fact that they are not going to be in the Super Bowl this year, that Rex Ryan wanted to recapture some of that spirit that is a hallmark of being a New York Jets by his predictions earlier this year?
I think so. I think he did that to take a lot of pressure off his players and to put it on himself. And I think to a degree it worked against the Colts and the Patriots. I think Rex is trying to restore some of that old, Jet pride, some of that Jet swagger. Of course, his father, Buddy, was a linebackers coach under Weeb Eubank during that Super Bowl III victory.
Now, another thing I thought was very interesting as a part of the backdrop, because we did have Don Maynard's co-author who helped him write his recent book on the air as well, and we were discussing concerning the fact that the climate in New York, the Jets was also considered, I guess, the second team. And so has the Jets ever come from underneath that pressure of being the second team in New York?
I don't think they really have. I mean, I grew up in the New York area during that time of the Joe Namath era, and I think at that time they did rival the Giants in popularity simply because they appealed to a whole new audience, especially the younger crowd. And, of course, they were more successful than the Giants at that point. And I think now they're getting back to that point. I think, Rex Ryan has brought the Jets, taken to the AFC Championship game the past 2 years. And, again, I think they rival the Giants in popularity in the New York, New Jersey area.
Now, throughout the recent history in the last few days here, there's been a knock on Ben Roethlisberger concerning the fact is that he doesn't have the style points of maybe a Tom Brady or the stats of a Peyton Manning. But do you think also back in that day, since a lot of persons were too young or don't even know anything about a Joe Namath, that perhaps when you look at that game, he didn't really win that game on any major substance because there were other players who helped win that game, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do the book. A great myth has arisen over Super Bowl III, that Joe Namath went out and, basically passed the Colts out of the stadium. And, I mean, until recently, he was the only Super Bowl winning quarterback who did not throw a touchdown pass in the game. The running of Matt Snell, the Jets' offensive line, their defense, which everybody underrated, their kicking game with Jim Turner, and the great catches of George Sauer, were all very important elements in that victory. Joe gets the credit because he guaranteed the victory, and he did have a decent game, but he did not have what you would call a great game.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I did like about your book, that you did highlight Matt's contribution. Also, tell me about the situation on the Baltimore coach side. A lot of people are not familiar. I hate to say that I'm old enough to remember, but that guy, the league MVP, Earl Morrall. Mm-hmm. Tell me about him.
Well, Earl was, he was basically a journeyman quarterback until he reached Baltimore, and then that year, subbing for the injured John Unitas, took the Colts to a 13-1 record. By the time they reached the Super Bowl, after two more playoff victories, they were 15-1, and Earl was named NFL MVP that season and really had a great year. Unfortunately for him, he just had probably his worst game of the year in the Super Bowl.
So when a person today goes out and get a copy of this extraordinary book, From Baltimore to Broadway, Joe, the Jets, and the Super Bowl III Guarantee, what are some of the takeaways and some of the lessons you want them to value and appreciate?
Well, one thing is that the thing that Don Maynard emphasized to me was that the Jets' victory was really a victory for underdogs, in a lot of different ways. They were 18-point underdogs, which is still the largest spread in Super Bowl history. But they believed in themselves. Even if no one else believed in them, the Jets believed in themselves. And as Don Maynard said, that victory is not only a victory for the New York Jets, but also for, underdogs or people who feel like they're underdogs in life, that if they believe in themselves and work hard, they can accomplish a lot of great things.
And I want to make sure I'm clear on something. Do you think that Joe Namath has been given too much credit for this, and that there should be a balance? And what your book does is attempts to create that balance of information as relates to this historic event?
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, there were so many people who contributed to that victory. I'm not trying to downplay Joe Namath's role in that game, but I think the New York media at that time, built him up. He was Broadway Joe. He was, Joe Willie White Shoes. I mean, he had a lot of nicknames. He was the glamour boy of New York at that time, and I think people tend to overlook the contributions of a Matt Snell, of a Jim Turner, of a George Sauer, the Jets, and the Jets coaching staff. Weeb Ewbank did a tremendous job in that game, in game planning for the Baltimore Colts, which is actually the team he used to coach in the NFL.
Speaking on the subject of the New York Jets coach, how come he's not given a lot of credit for his coaching skills, and how do we place him in the history, historically speaking, of New York coaches or coaches in general?
I would rate Weeb Ewbank very high. I mean, he's still the only, and will be the only man in history, since the AFL, of course, is defunct, that won league championships in both the NFL and AFL. Of course, he coached the Colts to NFL championships in 1958 and 1959, including the game that really put the NFL on the map, the greatest game ever played, is a nickname for it, and it was the Colts' overtime victory over the Giants in the sudden death game in 1958. Weeb does tend to get overlooked. I think that's unfortunate, but I think he should be rated very highly among the all-time coaches.
Tell me something about his style of coaching. We see so many images of a Tom Landry. We see so many images of a Vince Lombardi and him in his speeches. What was his type of leadership skills in his demeanor?
Weeb was understated, and I think that kind of, maybe hurts him a little bit in historical perspective. He wasn't, he didn't have Vince Lombardi's, let's say, charisma or his forceful personality. To me, Weeb Ewbank was kind of like Chuck Noll in Pittsburgh. Chuck Noll won 4 Super Bowls with the Steelers, but when people talk about the great coaches, they talk about Lombardi and Landry and Bill Walsh and some of the others, Bill Belichick, but you never hear Chuck Noll's name mentioned, even though he won 4 Super Bowls. And I think Weeb Ewbank was kind of like that, kind of under the radar. But like Chuck Noll, he was a disciple of Paul Brown. They both, grew up in the Paul Brown system, and of course Paul Brown, is really the father of the modern NFL.
Good piece of information. Tell me how to get a copy of this extraordinary book. Let me know about any Facebook, website, etc. to stay in contact with you to get this and your other offerings.
They're available in bookstores. It's available on Amazon.com, and it's available through the publisher.
Well, thank you so very much. This will be heard over and over again at DrAlvin.com, the website, DrAlvin.com on Facebook, and also we're now on YouTube with these interviews. You have a great and wonderful weekend, and who are you picking for the Super Bowl, sir?
Well, I grew up a Packers fan back in the 60s, so I guess I'll lean toward Green Bay.
Oh, you're leaning toward them. So, I mean, is it you're not, firmly behind them, or you're just leaning because of loyalty?
Leaning because of loyalty. I think they have a good shot at winning. I was a little surprised, and still am, that that they're actually rated favorites over Pittsburgh, considering the Steelers' recent Super Bowl experience. Usually teams with Super Bowl experience, are favored. But I think it's a toss-up game. I wouldn't be surprised to see either team win.
Well, thank you so very much, Ed. You have a great and wonderful weekend. Look forward to talking to you soon one day concerning your other books, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.